And welcome into the Bobby Carpenter Show here. I'm here as always and running with my guy, sitting shotgun with me, Joshua Perry, chilling with the hat on backwards, ready to go. We're in our first, like, kind of post football week. Joshua, how does that feel for you, given the fact that your weekends are all back right now?
Yeah, weekends are back. That's really nice. It feels like the storylines never stop, though. And we feel that way about the NFL already. But in college football, it's starting to get that way. A lot of news, a lot of stuff to dig into. So I'm excited about the offseason.
Yeah, it should be pretty good. I mean, the good news is the Buckeyes, given the fact, their coaching carousel has continued spinning and it's taken a while. And I'm curious to see, Joshua, like the NFL has it mastered where you look from like January, we'll start with the beginning of like the calendar year, like the actual calendar year as we roll through. Like you start with the playoffs, roll into the Super Bowl, give yourself a couple of weeks off. By the way, like intermittently in there now you have the All-Star games, which are
Sure.
like kind of pseudo NFL college. Like people are watching, if you're NFL fans, college fans, you're watching your guys. And then you ultimately go into the combine. And then at the combine, free agency news starts like peeking out. And then you have free agency, you have pro days, you have the draft, you go from the draft into OTAs, then into mini camp, and then you basically have like a 5 to 6 week hiatus before you start. But outside of that, the NFL controls like 45, 44, 46 weeks, right in that sweet spot of the actual calendar year. It feels like college football, if they start to play their cards right, you'll be able to push out content and to be able to keep fans engaged that entire time if they finally get this calendar right.
Yeah, I think that's the difference is like for college football, they are not in control of what's going on. We're getting the storylines as a byproduct of some of the chaos that is happening in college football. And to your point, like it's very defined in the NFL exactly what's going on at any point in the year. And college football, you're kind of in this place where you're doing your playoff and you're crowning a champ at the same time as you're doing what your free agency window would be at the same time as kind of the coaching cycle is in flux. It's one of the wildest things that we get to take in as college football fans. So I agree with you. Maybe stabilize the calendar a little bit and get the thing under control. But again, content is everywhere right now.
Content is king, and like that's going to continue to be king the entire time. And that's one thing that the NFL has mastered. We'll see if college football with their new plan. I mean, I know the Big Ten and AC or SEC, they're having their little collab trying to figure this out. There's a lot
The
of
last
things.
collab didn't work.
Well, yeah, the alliance, the
Yeah.
alliance. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think like of a good analogy of the alliance of where we want to go with that. But I mean, the alliance, I mean,
It was like my couple of
kind of like the
thruple show
Warsaw, maybe
where
the Warsaw Pact. Like it worked for a
it's
minute,
it's the
but not
couple of
really.
thruple show where they
Couple
get
of
in it
throw.
and they're everybody has a plan and they want to be in it together and it's open lines of communication, and then you figure out that one of the people who is in this adventure is going to completely disregard one of the other members, right? And it's like, oh, this is not what we got into. We were supposed to be a team. It's like, no, there is no team.
Well, here's the problem. Like two's company, three's a crowd. Unless you're Rick James, because Rick James said three is not a crowd. So I mean, he's on another level, playing at a level that probably I know myself. I don't want to speak for you, but given the fact that you're about to become a pending new father, I don't know if three's company for you either. So there's a lot of things you got to work through there, Joshua.
Listen, I'm not on the Rick James plan. Never have been at any point in my life.
I don't know. I mean, Georgette, like, I mean, you seem like you've got some Rick James vibes. Your lovely mother, she might, I mean, would she approve or disapprove if you were living the Rick James lifestyle?
She would slap me upside the head, and you know that.
Absolutely, she would. That is tremendous and fantastic. But there's a ton of new news coming out for this Buckeye squad. And like we said, the calendar never stops. They're trying to figure out the coaching staff and everything else that's going on. They're bringing in guys. They're right in the thick right now of winter workouts. We've got the Buckeye Cruise coming up that is going to be going on this entire week. Joshua, you're normally a regular attender on the Buckeye Cruise, but given the fact that you're a pending father to be, your lovely wife, Maddie, is due in a couple weeks, you're choosing not to go. Any fond memories of this Buckeye Cruise?
I've got fond memories all around. First off, as it's well documented, it's one of the greatest fundraising adventures you could go on. While you're having fun, you start to forget the fact that you're there for a fantastic cause, and that's raising money for cancer research. And so I'm definitely going to miss that aspect of it. Going to miss a lot of friends that I've made out there on that cruise. I'm going to miss the brotherhood as well. And you know how it is. You got generations of Buckeyes on there, and I certainly appreciate that. One of my biggest memories, though, was that 10th year cruise. I think that was the first year I was on there, and it was a little bit of a rowdy pack that we had to prune down just a little bit. But once we got it figured out, some of the guys from my class that have been back, Tyvis Powell's one I would name, and on the day we're recording this, it's his birthday, so happy birthday to my brother there. Guys like that have shown up year after year and done a great job for the cause.
It's pretty tremendous. And you mentioned the generational aspect of it. We'll get into that because it's amazing. You're like this, you're the same distance from me as I was from our linebacker coach, like Luke Fickle and Mike Vrabel, Ryan Miller, around Joey Galloway, like all of these guys. You start talking in 10-year decades and increments here, and the connectivity that Buckeye Nation gives you. And the cruise is kind of one thing, like it's for the James Cancer Hospital. And I think there's a little bit of an NIL component to it now.
No doubt.
Thanks to NIL, they're able to get current players on, which is absolutely tremendous. Ryan Day comes on with his entire family, raises money though for the James Cancer Hospital. And that's the one unique piece about Ohio State is how holistic kind of everything is, where you can kind of pull in all the parts of the university, the hospital and treatment care part of it, the athletics, the academics, and push that all together, Joshua, where you're coming together to make a difference. But while you're doing it, you're having an awesome time, and you forget that you're raising, not one, not two, not three, but now we're into the $4 and $5 million a year for the James Cancer Hospital, which is absolutely tremendous.
Yeah, and there's nothing like it. People have tried to replicate similar things and they can't get it together. And when people talk about Buckeye Nation, it's going to sound like an infomercial, but when people talk about it, all the things that they say are 100% true. That brotherhood that exists is true. The support from the community is true. The ability to leverage the network and the foundation of this university to support great causes is 100% true. The resources that you can tap into in Columbus, Ohio, which is one of the greatest places you could live if you're a college student or after college even, is great. And so I'm definitely going to miss it. And, just understand my support is always there for this cause specifically because it's phenomenal.
It's absolutely tremendous. And so we got a huge show today. We got a new LB coach, Joshua, which I know is something that you're interested in, something that I'm interested in. They've got some way too early ESPN rankings, which are big, some top stories around college football, which we'll get to. The basketball team, well, they've got a new coach, kind of little interim coach situation. We've got our tailgate talk, the questions from the listeners. All of this is going to be tremendous. So we're going to start coming up with the new Buckeye linebacker coach, who it is, and the difference they will make. Coming up next, right here on the Bobby Carpenter Show. What if I told you that Ohio State now would be employing on their 10-man coaching staff three former Buckeyes, two of them in the same class? Two of them I played with. They were freshmen my senior year. Got Brian Hartline as the wide receiver coach, who's doing a fantastic job. We have Tim Walton, defensive back coach, who played with the guy who coached Joshua and I and Luke Fickle back in the early 90s. And I actually played for him in Detroit. And now a guy they're elevating from graduate assistant to official linebacker coach. He can get out, he can recruit, he can do everything in James Laurinaitis. Joshua, when you hear that, the guy is a three-time All-American. I believe he won the Nagurski Award, the Lod Impact Trophy, three-time All-American, all-time leading tackler for the Rams, which is a long storied franchise. Moved a little bit, but they've had a lot of success and a lot of great defensive players. He's the all-time leading tackler. He will now be the linebacker coach of Ohio State. What type of impact is that going to have?
You missed a Butkus Award in there as
I'm
well.
sorry.
Huge impact, obviously, and I think it's a wonderful thing to have Buckeyes on staff, and I think as much as Ohio State can get back to that with guys who deserve to be in those spots, I'm all for it. When I think about James Laurinaitis, I go back to watching Ohio State football as a kid, and I watched you out there, and I watched AJ and Schlegs, and then it was kind of the next crop, and I'm watching James Laurinaitis out there with Marcus Freeman, who are two guys that I'm still well connected to today, and it's almost like watching your heroes evolve in life, where I get to see you doing phenomenal things. The same thing, AJ, I watch him every day, and Schlegs, we all know what he's up to, and then Marcus is out there living his dream as a coach, and James is now starting his dream path as a full-time coach after a great career in media. It's phenomenal. And I think what he can provide, not only in terms of the schematics and the coaching and the development, not only in terms of the recruiting, but in terms of what he can give to young people is what excites me, because he is a guy where if I've got a question about life, I can call him up on the phone. I know I'm going to get some really good advice. And so to have that type of person running the linebacker room, which is typically the type of person it's been when that room has been at their best, is what excites me.
It's awesome because you got to play for a guy who I did, who was an alum of Ohio State, and Luke Fickle, and like his passion for it. And people talk about like recruiting, and to me, and I'm sure similarly to you, like you wanted to go someplace where you felt like there was an authentic relationship with this person. Like it wasn't a sell job. I said there's a difference between selling and telling. And when you're an alum there, you don't have to sell anybody on anything. You can just tell them about your experiences and what Ohio State can ultimately do for you. And so Brian Hartline's been able to do that. Tim Walton now coming back, although it's been 30 years since he played here. He played in the NFL, or he coached in the NFL, played at Ohio State, and now returns back. And so he's been tearing it up as you see all these five-star corners that he's been involved with signing. And now James Laurinaitis is going to be there. And Luke Fickle, Vrabel, like Andy Katzenmoyer, Galloway, Springs, Winfield, like Niall Diggs, like these were all dudes who I grew up watching play. Joshua, you talk about me, myself, AJ, Schlegs, and then Marcus and James, and like we kind of turned the room over to them. And so I know what James was about. It's amazing. Like James and Marcus, like they were both at my wedding when they were in college. Like I got married my second year out of the league, and those guys were still in school. James brought his lovely wife, Shelly, girlfriend at the time. Not sure that she was 21 at the time, but you know what? She was having a good time
Here
nonetheless
you go.
at the wedding. Well, hey, listen, everybody was having fun. And that's the brotherhood, and that's the relationship. When I talk about it, and you kind of always see guys the way they are. When I'm around Matt Wilhelm and C. Grant, like Rob Reynolds, like those guys are always the starters to me.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter the fact, like what you do in the NFL, what happened, and like I've talked to AJ and Schlegs about this, especially AJ, because we came in, we're freshmen with them. And so like James and Marcus were kind of always our backups. And even in my mind, like James is a wildly successful NFL player, but he was always kind of the guy that was behind me, and him and Marcus, and like getting to see those guys now, kind of blossom and flourish has been fantastic on a professional level. But now that James is back here, like the recruiting element that you're going to be able to bring,
Yep.
I said it's akin to Brian Hartline. And like, I hope one day, as I see JT Barrett, who's a quality control coach up in Detroit with the Lions, he was with the Saints, played there. Then Dan Campbell brought him up. And I'm like, I'm hoping one day that maybe he can be a quarterbacks coach at Ohio State, ascend a coordinator, whatever. But like the more guys you can have with the connectivity to Ohio State and understanding how unique and special this place is,
Yep.
there were great players here. I think it helps in recruiting, it helps in development, and it really the toughness or all these aspects that we talk about it. Those guys get it because they were here and they lived it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you mentioned other guys like Kenny Guyton. You see him floating around out
Yes,
there, and
Kenny
now
as
he's with
well.
Fick at Wisconsin. And there's always that hope that one day something does work out where you can get a guy like that back in the building. Took the long road, wasn't easy for him when you needed him. He really stepped up in some big moments. Like you want to instill that. I mean, you've mentioned that with all the guys. I think it really matters. And then what's unique too is when you're Brian Hartline, you could be like, listen, I came here and I became a great NFL player, and you can do the exact same thing that I did. And when you're James Laurinaitis, you can say that about the linebacker room. But then you start to think about the career path and the after football, which I don't know how many kids are considering as much now, but it's still important. And when you're Brian Hartline, you can say that you can leave the league and then you can get right into coaching, and you feel like you were developed for a moment to where you can now instill values into young people. James can say the same thing. He can also say, hey, I took a stop in the media, so if you need a little bit of help with that and want to know what that business is like, you can come talk to me too. I think those are all of the things that makes bringing guys back into the program extremely special.
Well, you mentioned the media aspect. I was talking to a friend of mine, Jacob Hester, who I do some XM with, LSU grad. And he goes, I love talking to your guys at senior bowl because they're all so well spoken. And I'm like, well, like you're bringing pretty smart guys, like they're developed a lot, they understand it, they work on it. And so they give you that element that allows you to transition pretty easily and seamlessly into the media. And then you mentioned obviously that, the transition, like if a guy like Hartline, when you've played in the NFL, or even a guy like Kenny Guyton, who's taking the longer road, maybe a JT Barrett can come back. It's pretty special. And one of the guys at Ohio State, Joshua, a guy that who is a non-coach but has been there for a long time. They called it the keeper of the flame. And Ryan Day never played at Ohio State, didn't coach Ohio State before. Jim Tressel coached there, never played there. John Cooper, came in from the outside. But as long as you have a former player there who understands it, it almost feels a little bit like they called it like Kennedy's Eternal, like the keeper of the flame, like of the program of what the heart and soul of Ohio State is. And I really enjoy the fact you have Hartline, you have Tim Walton, now James Laurinaitis, Devin Jordan,
Sure.
who, maybe didn't have the most heroic high school career, he had a lot of injuries, but he's back. Like he's helping Hartline. Awesome human being. And what these guys are able to share and to give and how they're able to develop, I think is something that you really can't underrate because not a lot of places across the country have something like that.
No, it's very uncommon. And I think the other thing too is when you have the former guys on staff, it makes it easier for other former players to want to be around the program. And one of the things that I will say is like, there were times where I'd be out at camp as a high schooler. I saw James Laurinaitis for the first time. I'm like, oh my God, I'm starstruck. I saw you for the first time. I was a little bit starstruck, and then I was tired of seeing you so
Right.
daggone much. But the idea that you can see some of the greats there at practice, right? Like you can see some of the greats there while you're working out, um, it helps develop the guys, man. Like it really gives them an image of what they can become, and really a sounding board if they have questions about their experience at Ohio State.
Well, and this, like at Ohio State, it has almost a professional feel. And like a lot of college football at the top end is getting this, but Ohio State's probably been there for 20 years because it's a big small town, but
Yep.
it's really the team of the state. Ohio is the seventh largest state, I believe, in the country. There's 11 million people, and I say probably 10 million of them are Buckeye fans. So they rise and fall the attitude and the emotions of the state with the performance on Saturday. And so, as a guy who has played there, you have a unique ability to relate to that and understand the pressures of what
Yep.
goes into that. And now, even more so, like when you start talking about these things and everything else, the social media and the phone, where
Right.
you're either the best or the worst based upon your performance on any given Saturday.
Yeah, I mean it's tough, right? It's a hard place to be, and it's funny. I joke around with people like I live here in Chicago now, and I see a lot of Wolverines around here, and it's like, well, why is that? It was like, well, they don't want to live in Ann Arbor after they graduate. It's just not the place to really flourish. There's no knock on Ann Arbor, but it's not a huge city, a big
Yeah,
metropolitan with a big financial base. You come to Columbus, man, like people come and they don't leave. Like you don't have to leave, and there's a beauty with that, but also there's a lot of pressure that comes with that.
there is a ton. So we're going to put a pin in that. We're going to dive into some more college football stories. ESPN has their way too early 2024 college football rankings. Where's Ohio State? Too high, too low, just right? We'll find out next here on the Bobby Carpenter Show. And what an offseason for Ohio State. Start taking a look at it. Had a couple offensive coordinators, from Bill O'Brien to Chip Kelly. I think everybody's pretty happy about that. Bring in Matt Guerrieri as the D-backs coach to assist Tim Walton there, who is now promoted also, not just from corners coach, Purdue associate head coach, which is phenomenal. Like I said, played at Ohio State, coached in the NFL for a long time, killing it on the recruiting trail. I played for him in Detroit, so I will personally testify that he is one heck of a football coach, getting the associate head coach title, which is tremendous, which is big. And then James Laurinaitis coming in. And so you look at all the stuff that's coming down. You got Caleb Downs coming in. You're bringing in Junkins. We've got linemen coming in from Bama, quarterbacks coming in from Bama. It feels like all the momentum they've had, even after that little Bill O'Brien blip and on to Chip Kelly, Ohio State is looking good. And so as we look at ESPN's way too early top 25, and we'll sit here, Joshua, and I'm going to start with 10. We've got Utah at 10, we've got Bama at 9, and we've got Penn State at 8. Do those three seem pretty right to you based upon where they're at?
Yes, Utah is one of those teams where I think, they've been very consistent, but this might be a year where they could shock some people even more on a national scale. They got like a seventh-year quarterback too, so that certainly
Yeah.
doesn't hurt their chances. Bama, it's different, and if you ask Bama fans right now, they feel like their program is in a tailspin, but the reality of the situation is still extremely talented. And I also think Kalen DeBoer is a phenomenal football coach, so he'll be able to figure things out there. And then Penn State was actually a mover in these rankings. They were somewhere outside of the top 10 in the initial ESPN Too Early top 25 there, and they're rising. And I think part of that is because they solidified both coordinator spots. Like they're coming into the offseason, DC's a question, OC's a question. Now they got that figured out.
You lose Diaz down to Duke, so obviously
Yep.
that's tough. But James Franklin, I'll say this: he's a heck of a recruiter, and if he has good coordinators, their team
Mhm.
is usually pretty good.
Yep.
Bama, Kalen DeBoer is good, but it seems like this year, Bama fans, like if you go 10-2, 9-3, like don't panic. You
Right.
lost a lot of really good football players. He'll recruit them, he'll replace them, you'll be in a better spot. After that, this is what's surprising. Number 7, you have Missouri. Number 6, you have Ole Miss. Number 5, Notre Dame. Those are teams that maybe outside of Notre Dame, you're not used to seeing this high in the rankings.
Yeah, I mean, Mizzou, we Buckeye fans are very familiar with that squad after the bowl game there. It's a well put together team. I think Eli Drinkwitz is doing a great job with them. They've got momentum. They also had some turnover. I believe Schrader, I don't know if he's coming back or
Schrader's
not.
gone. He's
Yeah.
left. But
And then
outside of that, they return a lot. They
they
lose a
do.
little bit on the offensive line, but like a
They
lot of
lost
their
their D coordinator too, and I think
yes.
that's a big one. He went over to LSU, so something to watch. Ole Miss has had a hell of a offseason in the transfer portal. Now they lost Judkins, which was a big one, but they got a ton of guys that came in there, so I could see why people are excited. They got their quarterback back as well. And then Notre Dame is the more interesting one. I spent a lot of time covering them because of my work with NBC, and I think that they were a very good football team last year. I do think that there are going to be some holes. Like I don't see the top flight wide receiver play that you typically see with this. And they got Riley Leonard in there, who is a great runner, still needs development as a passer. They're going to have to do that. They're losing some big pieces on defense, but they got a couple big pieces returning too. Like it's going to be an exciting season to watch them because I do think there's a chance that they could live up to this number 5 too early, but number 5 definitely does seem high.
Well, number 5, listen, it's great now because you're getting a home game. Like it's not on the outside looking in anymore. Yeah, you don't get the bye, but you're in a good spot. And this seems like a classic Notre Dame team, Joshua. Like good core, good nucleus of players inside, maybe not the elite receivers, which they've had from time to time. Usually struggle a little at corner. They've got good safeties. And
Yep.
we'll see. Obviously, Riley Leonard, really good player. I know Ohio State really was looking out for him. Maybe not the greatest downfield passer, but he's a winner. He's a competitor. You
Yep.
watch him run and move the chains. So Marcus Freeman, they've got a good team sitting there. So as you look at this now, the top 4, and I think they're honestly, Joshua, like we're talking about this kind of gradual. It seems like at 5 there's a plateau, and then
Mm-hmm.
4 is a little bit of a jump. It's a little
Yep.
level up where these next 4 teams, it's like if we want to spin them in a mixing bowl, you could kind of spit them all out and nobody would really argue all that much. Texas at 4, Oregon at 3, Ohio State at 2, Georgia at 1. Seems right to me based upon the talent on the rosters.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Texas, you got Quinn Ewers coming back, which is huge. I also like the way that they played on defense. Certainly got to shore up the secondary, but they were able to get after people up front. They played aggressively, which I appreciate. Oregon is going to be one that I'm looking out for this year. And I know a lot of people are thinking that they could win a national title. I believe it too. You get Dylan Gabriel in there to replace Bo Nix, and I think that's a big pickup. They have done a phenomenal job in the portal. They've done a great job in high school recruiting. But Dan Lanning's kind of got that thing going that people criticize Ryan Day for, where he's like 1-4 against his rivals, hasn't beaten Washington. He had a little bit of a tough time with Oregon State there at one point, so he's got to get that figured out. Ohio State, this feels like a little bit of a do or die year. It certainly is all in. I love the roster as constructed. Got to see what the quarterbacks look like, but I trust Ryan Day when it comes to getting quarterback right. And then Georgia's Georgia, man. Kirby, hell of a coach. Carson Beck. Carson Beck was
Yep.
not talked about nearly
Very
enough
good. Very good.
throughout the season. He is a really good quarterback. So interested there, and not to derail this thing, but Michigan started off in the initial too early at number 6, and they've fallen, I believe, to number 13. I think that's reflective of some of the changes they've had this offseason, the losses they had in terms of personnel.
Yeah, we'll put a pin in Michigan because it's interesting. Like they've obviously lost a ton on their coaching staff, and I think they have 18 players at the combine. So well represented, but when you're well represented at the combine, that means you lost a lot as well. It's
Yep.
interesting because Kirby Smart, as you mentioned, Joshua, talking about Dan Lanning at Oregon. Dan Lanning has struggled against his rivals. Ryan Day, you could say, like the last 3 years, lost to Michigan, beat them the first year, probably the second. They punted, obviously, but struggled a little bit, and maybe that in some bowl games as of late. We'll value the meaning of that, whatever.
Yep.
But Oregon, Ohio State, and then Kirby Smart. The fact that they've won the last two national championships is one thing, but he didn't fare well against Nick Saban. Like if
Nope.
you look at his record, the year that he beat them was able to get through. That's the year that Saban they lost their two top receivers with Bryce Young, and that's the year that people were criticizing Bill O'Brien. I'm like, well, you lose J-Mo Williams and oh goodness, you get drafted to the Texans. I can't. His name is eluding me at this point. But you lose two like top flight NFL receivers. Yeah, you're going to struggle when you're built around the passing game. So all of these guys at the top, everything's kind of cleared for him.
Yep.
DeBoer has gone at Washington. Harbaugh's gone at Michigan. Saban is now gone at
Yeah.
Alabama. And so it'll be interesting to see how kind of, we'll call them the young guns, perform. And then Sark, like obviously he's done well. He beat Nick Saban, his former coach, but they've got some issues at Texas, and he's done a good job. But I think these are pretty good rankings. It seems about right to me, especially that top four. You can kind of mix them around however you want. It doesn't really matter. But I'm telling you, if we get these 12 teams in the playoff, of those 10, like I feel pretty good about it, and I'm pretty darn excited about it. All right, coming up, we'll go around the world of college football a little bit. Ohio State got some changes on the basketball hoop as well. On the hard court, we'll dive into that here next on the Bobby Carpenter Show. All right, we're going to go around the world of college football now here on the Bobby Carpenter Show. And thank you for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, leave your comments. Social media, we appreciate everywhere. Give us a follow. If you're on Bally's, thank you for tuning in. Sitting here with my man, Joshua Perry, giving you all the insights into Ohio State and college football from around the country. And Joshua, the ACC, they approved the use of in-helmet communication, the speakers, if you will. They have to wait for NCAA approval to approve the decision. Do you think this picks up, and do you think this becomes the norm now in college football?
I think it should be the norm. They use it in the NFL. And I know that there are a lot of coaches that actually prefer to signal in for tempo reasons. And some of them have really good sign decoders on their staff that can use legal means to try to figure out what teams are doing. So they feel like they can gain an edge. But the idea for me is if we have the technology, I don't know why it's available. And if you don't want to use the technology, you don't have to use it. I will say this: it's an adjustment when you have the speaker in your helmet. I was a green dot guy when I was playing in the league. I don't know if you were.
Yep.
The first time you're hearing the coordinator over the walkie-talkie and they're giving you the call, and then they're like, hey, watch out for this. Exactly. And then, of course, when you go into certain places, the signal's always choppy for whatever reason. We know what happens there. But, the DC calls in the play. And then he's like, hey, but if we get this formation, make sure you check to this. And if we get this, make sure you check to this. And it's like, dude, shut up. And so there's going to be a lot of that goes on when it first gets installed that they have to work through. But ultimately, if the technology is available, let's use it.
Well, it's like people look at the natural analogy to the Michigan situation. It's like, well, this is all happening because we have the technology available. They say it's cost prohibitive, but I mean, let's be realistic about how much these two-way headphones use. I was a green dot guy. I mean, it is the worst sounding transmitter you're going to find. It is absolutely atrocious. So with that, like, we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars here to be able to get this implemented. So I feel like hopefully the NCAA will lean in and get that done. and then it will kind of spread through the rest of college football. And this doesn't have to be Power Five, it can be Group of Five. It's not overly expensive. By the way, college football, I don't know if you know this, the CFP just re-upped for what was it? 6 years, around seven and a half, $8 billion.
Yep.
Comes down to 1.3 billion per year, an increase basically of 2x, twice of what they were getting before. So I think somewhere in that like 650, 70, $700 million,
You think
you
they can
can
find the
find some
money?
room for some radios.
You think they can find it?
I would hope maybe some dollars in there for the players as well.
It's one of those
Um,
that you slip in and hopefully nobody finds out, right?
Yeah, you would think. I mean, it's pretty remarkable considering that's where we're at now. But listen, this is people love it. You're going to get big numbers with it. Hopefully, they're on good nights, and we'll get to some of the scheduling and everything else. Before we get out of here, though, in this segment, Ohio State they moved on from Chris Holtmann, and full disclosure, I really like Chris Holtmann as a person. He's a
Me
neighbor of
too.
mine. I've enjoyed him. It's just they've started fast and they've just tailed off in January. He's a great guy. I think he's a good coach. His guys still seem to be playing hard for him, Joshua. Even when that loss to Wisconsin in the final game, like you're down 17, you battle back to 5 in the second half. Like it's not like they quit, and it just hurts. But I get it with a new AD coming in. Maybe want to start fresh and try to build this thing from the bottom.
I understand it too. And I do think it's unfortunate. You talk to anybody, they'll tell you that Chris Holtmann's a phenomenal guy. I can vouch for that myself. I got to know him a little bit, and he actually invited me into his program to talk to his guys. And I was fortunate to be able to do that and develop a relationship with the coach outside of the sport that I played at Ohio State. And so I'm hoping for the best for him, but I do think ultimately it was the decision that had to be made for the Ohio State Hoops program. And I don't think anybody believes that Ohio State should be a Final Four team perennially. But you do think that they should be able to make a Sweet 16, Elite Eight, a Final Four run every so often. You want them to be in the mix, and that just wasn't happening as of late under Holtmann. So it's unfortunate as somebody who knows him like you do, and somebody who appreciates what he's done, because I know he cares about that locker room and those players. But, this is a life in the big city, and sometimes a hard decision has to be made, and that's exactly what happened here.
It's life in the big city. I feel like I'm talking to Urban Meyer for heaven's sake. But there's some truth to that. And
Well,
Joshua, I mean, more rubbed off on you than I think you care to admit. But the
yeah.
reality is for Ohio State hoops, you look at it, I mean, can you finish top 5 in the Big Ten? Can you make the tournament every year? Can you make it out of the first weekend most years? And like every 3 to 5 years, can you get to the Elite Eight and be like on the cusp? Can you give me a Final Four
Mm-hmm.
like every seven, like 6 to 8 years, like that? You
Yep.
feel like with the resources and the facilities and everything else, that's kind of where you should be. I was hoping because Ohio State, I said, is the only program that I know of where their last two football and basketball coaches had been to a Final Four in basketball with Jim O'Brien and Thad Matta, and in football had both won national championships. And I was
Yep.
holding out that both Chris Holtmann and Ryan Day would be able to continue that. So Chris Holtmann's done. Hopefully Ryan Day will be able to continue with three straight coaches winning national championships. Unfortunately, Chris will not be able to do that. But I believe he'll find another job and people will be
No doubt.
amazed at what he'll do somewhere else. And sometimes things just don't fit and they don't work. But unfortunately, he'll be out of here. Coming up next, we got tailgate talk. Your questions answered after the break here on the Bobby Carpenter Show. All right, welcome back into the Bobby Carpenter Show, and my favorite part of this show, I know it's Joshua's. We love to connect with the fans, connect with Buckeye Nation, and we get to do that through Tailgate Talk each and every week on Twitter at Bobby Carp Show, my man at RIP_JEP
Yes,
on
sir.
Twitter. We got at Schlegel Valley. He didn't join us, unfortunately, this week. He'll be back here soon, though. And at B Carp 3. Fire away your questions each and every week. Important question here. How do you think the play calling / offensive scheme or philosophy, Josh, will be decided now with Chip Kelly joining the staff?
I think it's going to be Ryan Day's scheme. Is going to be his philosophy. And I think there's going to be input and some mesh from Chip Kelly. And we talked about this a little bit the last time we got together. Ryan Day's pass game, some of Chip Kelly's run scheme. I think that you are cooking on all levels offensively. I think there's going to be a question about play calling. And quite frankly, I have no issue with Ryan Day's play calling and what he's done. I think having a guy like Chip Kelly in there can maybe help in some situations where there's a question about, do we go for it? Do we punt? Maybe Chip can force the envelope there, taking some shots on some fourth downs, things like that. But ultimately, I think that these are two guys that can mesh extremely well. And I don't think it's going to be a huge deviation off of what Ryan Day has done, because as much as people were looking at the offense last year and they said maybe it didn't live up to their expectations, Ryan Day, it's one thing I know he can do is he can design some offense.
He can. And what's interesting, Joshua, to follow up on that, if you watched UCLA, and I know you're covering a lot of the Big Ten, but Chip Kelly, if you've watched him, I mean, they love counter. They love
Mm-hmm.
to get a lot of dudes at the point of attack. And I
Yep.
watched one play where they pull a guard. They pull like the H or the U, the tight end off the ball around. And then I watched them pull the slot receiver
They
as
got a
well.
receiver coming around. I watched
Yes,
the same thing, Bobby. It's ridiculous.
they got three guys like hammered up in there, and they're like weaving their way for 5 yards. And so, Ohio State fans who want to see running the football power running scheme, this is it. You're not getting any better than that.
He got the backs for it too. I mean, that's a loaded running back room, and a guy that you just brought in that knows how to get big on the line of scrimmage. I know people are looking, he's a Pac-12 guy, and they're not big and they're not tough on the West Coast. Well, damn it, the scheme translates, so you just put the Big Ten players with it.
Yeah, you're getting bigger dudes. I mean, like, and here's the other thing, like Fry, their O-line coach, like he was with Chip Kelly. Like he was out there. Like there is a relationship. There's an understanding. I was sitting there, I saw him, at the lunch table here upstairs at the Woody. Like you should feel pretty good about this.
Yep.
Chip Kelly loves to run the football. Ryan Day is really good at throwing the football. You blend these together. Hopefully, what you're going to be able to do is blend together an attack as a second level player, as you and I both know, that when you're watching it, it all looks the same.
Yep.
And so you see this play action, they're running it, you got all this counter stuff, and then you have these unbelievable receivers. You can run some two-man routes over the top because you're so efficient at running the football that you have these five-star guys that are now one-on-one down the field with 8 men in protection.
Big voids, right? Like I think some of the best offensive play callers right now, and I look at Kyle Shanahan in the NFL and what he's done with a guy like Brock Purdy, and I think that he has made the passing game to a point where Brock Purdy gets big windows to throw into because everything is so cohesive. And you talk about some of the counter schemes and the power, they're doing that up in San Fran, and it really opens up that pass game to where on the second level on some of the go routes, I mean, you got guys with their eyes in the backfield. Next thing you know, there's a wide receiver with nobody within 5 yards of him.
How much better now? Like, and watching UCLA, and you remember when they had Zach Charbonnet and DTR, Dorian Thompson Robinson, who's now with the Browns, Charbonnet with the Seahawks. Think about this. Like now with Will Howard here,
Mm-hmm.
how much better do you feel about Will Howard with being with Chip Kelly based upon what you saw with that?
I mean, every offense to me in the modern day has to have an element of a quarterback who can threaten with his legs. And it's not that you have to run a guy a ton, but I need to respect his legs. And you look back at this past season, Michigan with JJ McCarthy, they didn't ask him to run a lot, but when they did, he was good. Even Michael Penix Jr., like he's a pocket passer. You watch his tape. There are some plays where they had him use his legs. There were some
Yeah,
critical fourth downs where they were like, all right, your quarterback won, you got to go get it. And I think it really makes a defense play with a level of apprehension that they should not want to play with, because you don't want to get burned by a quarterback who's skating out the backside for 15 to 20 yards because you're not disciplined. And when you couple that with all the guys up front moving, now you're really challenging the eyes of the linebackers and safeties, and that's a really difficult thing to try to overcome.
it's brutal. And you talk about that, like as a linebacker, you start shortening your drops and it limits the coverages you can run. Like you can't get crazy exotic with that stuff. So that's a big piece. Just the threat of the quarterback run. I'd say Michael Penix, I equate him a lot to CJ Stroud. And like you don't have to run all the time. But it's like, dude, it's like a jockey. Sometimes you just got to be able to show him the whip. If you know it's there, like you get one first down where it's 3rd and 8 and you drop too deep and he runs out of bounds at 9 yards or slides it, you have PTSD as a
Mm-hmm.
as a linebacker after that. Real quickly before we get out of here, College NCAA football is coming back. Buckeyes aren't available. Who is your go-to team to play with the new college football game?
I wanted to give a little bit of love to another Ohio school, the Toledo and Akron, Miami, Ohio U. I'm going outside of that. Luke Fickle is my guy.
Oh,
Luke Fickle coached me. He's got our guy Vrabes hanging around. We mentioned Kenny Guyton is
I
floating
love
around over
Kenny.
there.
That's great.
I'm going with the Wisconsin Badgers because they got a little Buckeye flavor.
Look at you, man, going inside the Big Ten, keeping it incestual with a guy that you know, a guy that you played with, and Kenny Guyton, smooth jazz. That's tremendous, Joshua. And I'm so happy that Luke's up there. He's doing good things. I think it'll be a big year for him. Plus Kenny
Yep.
Guyton coming along. I would probably pick a MAC team. Um, my goodness, I'm trying to think if I go somewhere, I'd probably want to go like out west. Maybe, I was always, I'm gonna be honest, like when I took visits, if Ohio State, like I wouldn't have loved all the dudes in our class. Like North Carolina, I'll be
Okay.
honest, is a pretty cool place to go to school. They got great
Okay.
colors. It's a beautiful
Sure.
university, great, like great academics, good looking
Watch some
girls,
hoops.
like good hoops. Like they've got everything you need. So I might have to go with Carolina. But coming up next, we're going to wrap up the show. Excitement level for the new EA Sports game. A lot of stuff we'll talk about. Anything else that Joshua wants to dive into because I know he is a man of learned knowledge, a house of learned doctors. Coming up here next on the Bobby Carpenter Show. All right, final segment of the program. And we're here with my man Joshua Perry wrapping this thing up. Covered a lot of ground. My man James Laurinaitis is joining the team. We got Diebler taking over for Chris Holtmann here for the final handful of regular season games. Way too early ESPN preseason rankings. Who would you play with in EA Sports College Football Top 25? It's coming out this summer. Joshua, like you're kind of on the cutting edge because I feel like this was around when you were in high school, but then it stopped right as you entered Ohio State. Your feelings about the games coming back?
Yeah, I got to be in the game as a student athlete. Thought it was super cool. Wish I, had a fat check from it, but that's neither here nor there. I'm not a video game guy,
Look
and
at
as
that
you
right there. That's
look
what I
at
got.
you.
That's what I got for my deal. I've saved this thing ever since. I cashed it electronically. I don't know if people can kind of copy this or whatever. They probably would advise me not to do that, but it's been cached and it is now, I don't know how many years old,
What's the
but
dollar figure?
about almost $1,500, like 1462.
Oh
So I said
man,
this is it's void after July 5th, 2016. So I think
what'd
it's
you buy
past.
with it?
I probably got some probably got I think I told my wife, I'm like, we'll go out to a nice dinner and then I'll, get you something for your birthday or whatever.
That's
Like,
fair.
I
That's
mean,
fair.
it wasn't a ton. My younger brother who played at Ohio University, since he was like later on and the game was making more money, he actually got like $2,300.
Sure.
I mean, like, but I go,
It's a Louis Vuitton bag.
this is the only money I actually made playing college football, $1,500. I feel good about it.
I mean, now kids are getting 25K just to get in the door. You got other guys
That's
making
for a visit,
100,000,
coach.
250, 500 million. I mean, we missed out on all the big money.
By the way, if you look over my shoulder, I keep that right underneath my diploma because that's the second most valuable thing I got while I was at Ohio State. So I've
That
got
is
my two
amazing.
degrees over here and that NIL check due to the lawsuit tucked right in. People always laugh at that. I'm like, you know what? It is what it is. But I appreciate it. Thank you for stopping by with me this week, Josh. We got some great Buckeye Cruise stories coming up next week, right here on the Bobby Carpenter Show.